Following weeks of, quote, significant health challenges, Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings has died. His office announced the news earlier this morning, saying that his death was due to complications with long-standing health challenges.
Cummings was, of course, a leading voice among African-American lawmakers and really among all lawmakers on Capitol Hill. He was adamantly against the Iraq War and served as chair of the House Oversight Committee, overseeing a range of investigations into the Trump administration. Joining us to discuss the impact of Chairman Cummings' death is Hill TV host of The Remedy and Why You Should Care, Jamal Simmons. Jamal, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Just tell us a little bit about who Elijah Cummings, the man, was and how he spent his life.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll just say, he was a family friend of ours. My wife worked for him as the first boss that she had on Capitol Hill when she came out of college. And he's somebody who was very kind to people. People talk about the way he reached out to folks. When you worked for him, he was very good at inspiring people and trying to encourage young talent to grow. So just as a person, as a man, I think there's a great sense of loss in Washington, and really across the aisle, because a lot of Republicans worked with him very well, too. Obviously, he was involved in some of the biggest stories that are happening right now in America, and it's somebody who, from the chair of the Oversight Committee, and when he was ranking member when the Republicans were in charge, really was trying to hold the president's feet to the fire. In fact, I looked it up. He was going after the president's financial statements on October 11th. So a week ago, this man was still, he's in a hospital bed, and he's still doing the work of his committee.
Jamal, tell us just about his legacy in the House of Representatives. He's been over for 20 years. I think he was the first African American Speaker of the Maryland House.
Speaker pro tem, yeah.
Yeah, the Speaker pro tem.
Yeah.
So he's a long legacy, both as a lawmaker and in the civil rights champion. So just tell us about that.
I mean, he certainly was. We can think back to 2015 during the Freddie Gray crisis in Baltimore, where the city erupted after that young African American male was killed and by the police, and the streets erupted. Elijah Cummings was the kind of guy who was out on the street, among his constituents every single day, talking about this and trying to cajole people and calm the waters down a little bit. So he wasn't a kind of an armchair politician. He wasn't sitting back and looking at this stuff from a distance. He was really still living in the community and working really hard for the constituents that he represented.
He also this summer had a very public spat with the President of the United States. First, his home was robbed, and the President seemed to celebrate that. We have that tweet. Really bad news. The Baltimore house of Elijah Cummings was robbed. Too bad. The President also, said that his home district was rat and rodent infested and couldn't imagine why anyone would live there. Today, the President has sent out the kind of tweet that you would expect a president to send out, saying, "My warmest condolences to the family and many friends of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I got to see firsthand the strength, passion, and wisdom of this highly respected political leader. His work and voice on so many fronts will be very hard, if not impossible, to replace." What do you think of all that?
Well, it's very nice that the president can send out a text or an email that is like normal. I mean, it's amazing that we think it's amazing the president to send out something like this. He does have speechwriters. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was, to me, an open question this morning exactly how that would go, especially after they had that fight this summer.
It's true. In the raucous day yesterday that happened in the White House with the Speaker, you just don't know what state of mind the White House is in. Whenever something like this occurs, how they'll behave. The president wasn't very generous to even people of his own party, like John McCain when he passed away. I mean, this president has a really hard time being generous to his opponents, even at moments where most humans just interact humanly.
So what are the next steps for the district? Will he be replaced? And then also just, how is he was a committee chairman. I mean, how is the party going to reckon with his loss?
Well, remember, in the House of Representatives, every member of the House is elected. Right. So you have to have an election, a special election. So at some point there will be a special election. Obviously, they haven't made any announcements about that. It just happened this morning. And so far, people do not know what will happen in terms of the chairmanship of the Oversight Committee. That's not something that's been revealed yet. So there's some questions around who will be the next chairman or chairperson of the Oversight Committee. So we'll see. But one thing that Elijah Cummings was known to say a lot was our children are the living messages to the future that we'll never see. It's something that is the first thing my wife said this morning when she heard the news. and I think it's written on his website. It's the kind of thing that really talks about how he saw the world and his role in the world, and we have to think about that. We talk a lot about this multiracial working class coalition. I heard you guys talking about it earlier. He's somebody who's a part of that multiracial working class coalition. He lives in a working class community. He's a working class kind of guy. He and his wife have been, Maya, who my heart goes out to this morning, they've been fighting for things like economic policy and trying to make sure that we deal with questions around wealth and criminal justice and infrastructure inside of cities. So this is a part of the Democratic Party that I think has always been focused on making sure the working class has been taken care of.
No question.
And I think he's going to be missed.
No doubt about that.
We also, I think Democratic politicians are memorializing him today. We have Kamala Harris, we have Ayanna Pressley, and a few others that have spoken out, and I believe we can throw those up here. She said that Kamala Harris says, "We lost a giant today. Congressman Elijah Cummings was a fearless leader, protector of democracy, and a fighter for the people of Maryland. Our world is dimmer without him in it." So.
Indeed.
And then Will Hurd says, Congressman Will Hurd, my thoughts are with the loved ones of Representative Elijah Cummings, the Baltimore community today. He was a shining example of how to be a fighter for his constituents. It was an honor to know him. I will cherish that I had the honor of calling him my friend. He will be missed. I believe Will Hurd is the only African-American member of the Congress who is a Republican in the House of Representatives. And then Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley says, our chairman leaves behind a beautiful and powerful legacy. I am already feeling the impact of a little less grace in the world. Deep gratitude to have spent these early months in Congress guided by his wisdom. Rest in power, Representative Cummings.
And I think all of that, and you've got the quote there also from his wife about, as you were saying, how he worked up until his last breath. I think the depths of sorrow that you see represented in those tweets across the aisle, across generations, across ideologies, it really speaks to the type of public servant that he was, a true public servant in every sense of that word.
Absolutely. And I remember when we interviewed him last year, everyone was very hot and heavy around the Mueller report and going after Trump and all these things. And I remember the thing about him when we were in his office was he was sort of like, settle the horses. There's a process here. The process is going to work. We'll see where it takes us. And he talked a lot about being a lawyer before he was a politician and really building his law firm and building cases, and let's just go after this methodically. And I think that's what we were doing. And I think we had some sound from that interview.
Let's take a listen.
I want to go down two paths, Jamal. One, I want to look at what President Trump has done, aided and abetted by the Republicans in Congress to tear down the foundations of our democracy. Whether he's doing it intentionally or not, it's happening.
His voice on these issues will be dearly missed by Democrats.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Son of sharecroppers, lived his entire life in Baltimore. One of 7, rose up to become a lawyer and one of the most prominent politicians in the country, and he certainly will be missed by this country.
Absolutely.
Jamal, thank you so much.
Thanks for remembering him, Jamal. Next on Rising, Chicago's public school teacher strike goes on strike today after beginning the school year without a contract in place.
And the teachers say that this strike is about way more than just money. We're going to speak to a writer on the ground covering the start of picketing today in the nation's 3rd largest city. That one Rising continues.